Chris William, and I'm the executive producer and moderator for the longtime syndicated PBS series, Carolina Business Review, seen each and every week across North and South Carolina on all of the PBS stations. This is a different installment. This is an online dialogue with those who influence, lead, are creative, and thoughtful about business and policy here in the Carolinas. And joining us now is Jim Newsome, who is the South Carolina, and I'm looking down at my computer, I apologize for that, but Jim Newsome is the South Carolina Ports Authority President and Chief Executive Officer, and he joins us from his home along the coast in South Carolina. Jim, welcome, and you look healthy. I'm assuming you're healthy.
Yeah, very healthy, Chris. Nice to see you. I hope you are as well.
Thank you. Yes, I am. So, Jim, thanks for taking the time. We'll spend the next few minutes talking a little bit about not just the port, but what the South Carolina port represents, one of the most important economic development tools in the Southeast and along the East Coast. That's not a surprise. Jim, this year, you were hoping to best your best year last year, 1.36 million cargo containers, and you were hoping to do better than that. It doesn't look like that'll happen. So how has COVID impacted not just the container count, Jim, but what the ports do for the United States in basically your business model? What's going to happen, you think?
Well, I mean, bear in mind, we're on a July through June fiscal year. So we had really 3 or 4 months left in that year. I think the good news is that the port network in this country has performed very well. It's an essential service. So there's really not been a disruption of cargo in and out of U.S. ports. As you said, we were on pace for a record year. We had 1.364 million beer containers last year. We had a plan for 1.385 million. A lot of business development in motion. So we were on a good track to meet that plan. And then all of a sudden, manufacturing stopped in China after Chinese New Year, and that morphed into a real shutdown of the Western world. So our current outlook is that we won't make our 2019 volume. We'll make about 1.345 million. So our volume in March through June will be down roughly 15 to 20%. Through really no fault of anyone's. It's just a matter of fact that we had to shut the world down, the Western world down for the health reasons. And then going into next year, we have the unenviable task of having to make a budget right now going into next year with all the uncertainty. So my best outlook is that our performance in fiscal 21 is probably about 10% down from fiscal 20. And hopefully fiscal 2022 snaps back to where we are in fiscal 2020. Mm-hmm. So U-shaped type recovery, because I think it's not going to be easy for the consumption side of our economy to snap back. I mean, we have really two economies in this country, one manufacturing, one consumption. They are linked to some extent. But as you know, BMW ships 70% of what they make elsewhere. So I think it's a slow recovery, and we have made a very good plan with our board to reduce about 10% of our cost structure, which is $220 million when you exclude depreciation. And I feel confident we'll execute that plan and not have to do any layoffs or things of that nature.
Jim, I want to come back to this idea as you're going through the numbers. I think so. Port maybe year over year will be down 10% possibly. And when you hear those numbers, it sounds a lot less acute than some of the other numbers that we post, not just in hospitality, but you mentioned BMW and Boeing in the Lowcountry and the automotive and aerospace cluster in South Carolina. So how much do their fiscal and economic woes weigh on you, and how much of that halo effect will show up in the port or the lack of port traffic?
Well, just one thing, bear in mind, when I compare to the last fiscal year, I'm not comparing to the plan for the next fiscal year. Our plan was actually for growth in fiscal 2021 because we're opening a new container terminal at the Leatherman terminal. So when you look at a shortfall on plan, it's more significant. Boeing doesn't do a whole lot of business via the port because they fly their supply chain. But obviously BMW, Volvo, the automotive industry, the tire industry, we're inextricably linked to them. So BMW has had what is essentially a 5-week shutdown. So that's affected our volume, both in containerized shipments and in setup vehicle shipments. because when they have not produced for 5 weeks, they're not shipping cars, and they again export 60 to 70% of what they make. I mean, our experience with BMW, and I think Volvo follows that track, certainly Mercedes-Benz in Alabama, the premium brands tend to do better. I mean, these are such great global brands. They make such great cars. They tend to snap back quicker. I know the demand in China has already started snapping back. So hopefully that part, the automotive piece, is a blip on the radar. I'm more concerned about the consumption economy in our country, which is a big part of the GDP. You know, we've tried to make a big move into retail distribution. Now we've had reasonable success in doing so. But where's the U.S. consumer going to be in the rest of the calendar year going into next year? I think that's a real open question when we're seeing, 22 million unemployment claims in this country, and the knock-on effect for commercial real estate and even state and local government tax revenues.
So if you're planning to increase your allocation to the retail supply chain, does that, I mean, it's the metaphor I'm going to use, Jim, but is this a bit like whistling past the graveyard, where you're thinking, well, maybe our expansion into that probably shouldn't be now, but longer term, yes?
No, I don't. Look, I think we've always felt, Chris, that the Southeast is the best place to be in the port business because we have the right fundamentals. And I would say that the population in the Southeast is going to continue to grow, maybe even more so now. I mean, I think its argument can be made that people are going to move out of big congested cities that are dependent on mass transit, as an example. And then we still manufacture and distribute in the South. We've got plenty of land, good labor, relatively good infrastructure. Although, yes, the people in South Carolina, the roads are terrible, but infrastructure-wise, we're still pretty good. So no, I don't think it's. I think it's the right strategy. I think you've got a two-tier retail economy right now. You've got the big retailers, Amazon, Walmart's, Targets, are doing very, very well. They're hiring people because they've got the omni-channel presence. They can distribute either bricks and mortar or via e-commerce. The smaller retailers are the ones that there's an open question about today. When you see a bankruptcy for Neiman Marcus or Lord & Taylor, whomever they're talking about today. So it's a two-tier retail economy. I think we've tended to focus on the bigger retailers. So I think that's been the right strategy.
When we think about the logistics chain, and obviously the Ports Authority, South Carolina Ports Authority is an important link in that. It is, as I said at the top of this dialogue, it's one of the most important assets of not just the Palmetto State, but the entire region in the East Coast. But if you extend that out to some of your partners, and I'm thinking specifically the airlines, not the trains and the rails, but the airlines, they are going through, obviously, very plainly, I would say a Six Sigma event. So do you fear for the airlines, and do you fear for the airlines as well as the ports impact from the airline partner?
Well, I think obviously I fear for the airlines only because I'm a frequent traveler. I rely on their service. I don't think there's a direct effect from the airports to the ports, except that they're a general indicator of the overall economy. I certainly think people are going to travel a lot less. I think we've all learned that we can do a lot by video. We certainly, part of our cost saving measures is to plan to travel a lot less. But yeah, I hope the airlines survive. They're a big part of our economy in the Southeast. It's how we get around. I mean, we've always, growing up in the South, we always joked that when you die, you go via Atlanta and Delta, I mean, that used to be the joke. And I think we're very dependent on that. We're very spoiled by that. So I think their challenge in ramping their business back up is much more significant because people are not going to be willing to be next to each other. If you think about a port, we're kind of a naturally social distance business. We have people in lift machines. They don't see each other all day. They really are remotely working. We greet trucks remotely. So we had a lot of the fundamentals that led to good distancing, good protection from this type of event in a relative sense. And I'm very proud of our maritime community. I have to just interject that. I mean, we just talk about the port employees, but we've got the ILA, the union, we've got the truck drivers. They've shown up every day, 8,000 to 10,000 people in our maritime community that have done very well. And And people have even started to appreciate trucks now, if you can imagine. People now realize that trucks are how things get into stores. So, but yeah, I worry. I worry for the airlines, worry for the airports. I mean, we've had a growing airport in Charleston, done very well, new terminal, and now all of a sudden their business is significantly reduced.
Let's take the maritime community out a little bit to another orbit. Let's talk about the cruise ships. There's a celebrity Carnival cruise that has been docked in the port of Charleston now at the Columbus. Isn't it the Columbus terminal for
Columbus Street? Yes.
Yeah, at least a month. And does not just COVID-19's impact on the cruise lines, does this reset the debate that has gone on in Charleston about having a relationship long-term with the passenger cruise lines? And does it give the opposition groups more, I don't want to say ammunition, but does it give them a bona fide argument to say, maybe we need to rethink this again?
Well, I don't think, I mean, I think the cruise industry, again, prior to this, has been a significant growth industry in this country. I mean, the numbers show that. I don't think that, that's pretty much inarguable, I would say. I think the people that sort of want to restart that debate are the same people that have honestly opposed the cruise business being here for 10 years. So I don't see that being overly different. We're very happy with our business relationship with Carnival. I feel bad for what they're going through right now. I mean, they essentially had a shutdown since March 11th, and I certainly hope they can restart that when it's the right time health-wise to do so. And I'm sure that the CDC and the cruise lines and the federal government will have a proper dialogue on that. We want to do a long-term deal with Carnival. We want to keep them here for a long time in scale. I mean, we've never said we wanted an unscaled cruise business. We think this market's got a certain size of ship that's relevant and a certain number of cruises, and we plan to work within that, and that's the commitment we've made to the community here. So we made commitments here with the city of Charleston 10 years ago with Mayor Riley. We've lived to all of those. We still work under those agreements today. And I don't see any reason not to continue doing that. The cruise business is worth about $8 million a year in operating cash flow to us, which is significant. And they are a very good customer and people that we enjoy doing business with.
One of the unique moments in time during a lot of this, not just crisis, but the financial aspects and the business aspects, has been the price of oil. Recently, in the last day or two, we've seen the futures of oil go negative in a pretty dramatic way. It's needless to say, in I would say biblical proportions, but also historic. Does oil in itself, does what is going on, the volatility in the price of oil, and even the intermediate term future of oil, does that factor into how you're modeling what you're doing at the port in the near term?
Well, I wouldn't say directly. I mean, I think there are several points to make. The shipping lines benefit from cheaper fuel. I mean, they're using more expensive ultra-low sulfur fuel today. That's the way that they, run their ships. So they benefit from cheaper fuel prices. The people who use their services and pay fuel surcharges benefit from lower costs. We're big into have 2 resin packaging facilities that are coming online in the fall in Charleston. There's a lot of export resin, which is a byproduct of oil. The demand for that doesn't seem to be affected. But then when you look at the important part of our economy in Texas, the oil industry and the knock-on impact on that, and just the uncertainty that creates economically on top of a lot of economic uncertainty, I think, I worry about the impact that has on the U.S. economy overall, because I forget what share it is, Chris, you may know, oil's 10 to 15% of the U.S. economy, I think. It's a number that I recall off the top of my head.
You used the term restarting the economy before, or had made a reference to it, Jim. The idea that South Carolina, Governor McMaster is one of the first governors that has taken an executive order in intention and in fact done something about restarting, opening up, I think is the term, the South Carolina economy. Some beaches are open, some are not. Charleston, the Low Country, is not at this point. Myrtle Beach and the Grand Strand are not. how do we, not whether you agree with Governor McMaster or not, but how do we approach the idea of having a balanced, reasonable debate about public health and what's appropriate, but also economic health and what's appropriate?
Well, it's certainly an interesting question. I joke with my wife that you see the impact of democracy now. I mean, everybody's got an opinion, right? I mean, federal government, state government, local government. I mean, that's the beauty and the curse of our system, I guess. You know, I think there's a real balancing act here. I mean, I think that obviously public health I mean, we've never seen this type of pandemic that's so not well understood about how it spreads, and the death numbers in cities like New York are just shocking when you read them every day. And you see 5% of the people are dying. On the other hand, I think people are concerned about the economy. I mean, I think the telltale effect of, you look at an economy like Charleston, it's been a boom town. I mean, absolute boom town. All of a sudden you see 20, 30,000 people out of work overnight. You wonder how they're going to survive. So it's a real balancing act. I kind of come down on the side that it's what I've told our staff. I said, look, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's up to us to use individual responsibility. And in my case, if that means if the economy opens up more, I'm going to be even more careful. I'm careful today. I'm going to wear a mask when I go out. I'm going to remain social distance. I'm going to wash my hands. I think it's really now is going to be down to individual choice and people being smart in terms of maintaining their health. Because it's clear in the South that we're going to open up parts of the economy. Whether we open up the right parts or not, whether a tattoo parlor is better than a beach, I have no idea on that. I mean, obviously I'm not going out to the beach and being around a group of people. So I think it's going to come down to individual action, and it's going to come down to people acting intelligently to protect their own health. Really, I think that's what we've emphasized with our staff. What I've seen is that our people have done that up to now. But it's clear that what happens in this country is going to be uneven, and it's also clear that it's got a political angle to it, which I hate. But there seems to be a matter of politics between parties and things like that.
Jim, thanks for taking the time. I'm going to cut you loose here, but you were kind to at the drop of a hat agree to do this. And before you leave, I do want to make mention, because this is not just it's not just because I know you, but it's worth mentioning that you were one of 5 people going into, not just nominated for, but being inducted into the International Maritime Hall of Fame in New York City next month. And I know that the event itself has been postponed, but it certainly is a high honor. And knowing what I know about your legacy, I know your father, being a former ports executive, would most likely be very proud. But we want to congratulate you on that, and thank you for your leadership over these years.
Well, it's very kind of you to acknowledge that, Chris. I'm very proud of that. I'm very honored. There's a lot of great people in that group, and there's a lot of worthy people that are not in that group. So it's a big honor. So take care, stay safe, and look forward to appearing face to face on your show again sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Take care. You stay safe as well.
Thank you.